Hello people, welcome back to my YouTube channel DS Tech Mirror. Topic for today's video is Azure Functions. In today's video we will see how to create Azure Functions and invoke them from SPFx webpart or consume them inside SPFx webpart. This will also cover running SPFx webpart with elevated privileges. In my earlier video we saw how to run SPFx webpart with elevated privileges using Power Automate. In this video we will see how we can achieve it using Azure Functions. We will cover some theory first and then move on to our demo. So let's get started. So we will start with a very basic question. What are Azure Functions? Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that lets you run event triggered code without having to explicitly manage infrastructure. So what do you mean by this is Azure Function is serverless means when we are writing Azure function, there is no need to worry about the infrastructure that our code requires, the amount of RAM it requires, the processor. We don't need to worry about it. Azure functions are completely serverless. We have to just focus on our business logic. Then there's a keyword event triggered code, which means that Azure functions are always triggered by an event. They are event triggered code. In today's video, we will use HTTP trigger. That is, we will be triggering our Azure function using HTTP call. Next, we can write Azure function with the choice of language. Azure function gives us the flexibility to choose the language of our choice. So in today's video, we will be using PNP.js with TypeScript. Azure function is PaaS, that is platform as a service. In Azure, we have various services like software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Azure functions come under platform as a service. Azure functions make the development process effective where you have to focus only on logic and the business. This is one of the advantage of using Azure functions. So while writing Azure function, we have to just focus on our business and the logic. There's no need to worry about the infrastructure which our code will be requiring. That will be taken by Microsoft Azure. You have to pay only for what you use. This is another advantage of using Azure function. That is, you have to pay only for what you will be using. Suppose we are deploying our Azure function in Azure. So for deploying our Azure function or for hosting our Azure function Azure, we are not going to pay anything. Microsoft is not going to charge us anything. That is only when our function will run. Only for that duration of time, Microsoft will charge us. So this is another advantage of using Azure functions. So now we will see how to create Azure functions. So there are different ways to create Azure functions like Azure portal. We can directly go to the Azure portal and using Azure interface, we can create our Azure functions. Another way is using Azure CLI, that is command line interface. We can install our Azure command line interface, and with the help of various commands, we can create our Azure functions. Then using Visual Studio, we can create our Azure function, and then using Visual Studio Code also. So in our today's demo, we will be using Visual Studio Code to create our Azure functions. Then authorization in Azure function. So in my today's demo, I will be creating list item using Azure functions. So for interaction with SharePoint, to authenticate my Azure function or to authorize my Azure function, I will be using client ID and client secret. As in my previous video where we use run with elevated privileges, where we saw how to elevate the user permission inside SPFx web part, we used Power Automate. So in that also we use authentication. We did authentication through client ID and client secret. We will be generating our client ID and client secret using this URL, that is app.regnew.aspx. Then we will be registering our app in this URL app.inv.aspx, and then for giving permission to our app, we will be using the below code. In today's demo, we will be giving our Azure function full control over the site collection. Then as I told you, we will be using PNP.js in Azure functions. So for that, we will be installing PNP.js. So to install the PNP.js, we will be using the command npm install at pnp/sp-commonjs at pnp/node.js-commonjs. Now, if you guys are regularly following my videos, while installing PNP.js in SPFx, what we were doing is at pnp/sp at pnp/node.js. Over here, while installing PNP.js for Node, we have to append this -common.js. This is because of the difficulties of working with ES module in Node. It is recommended to using mirror packages providing common.js modules. More detail about this is provided at this URL. You can go and check over there. But basically because of some conflict with the ES modules, so they have created another mirror packages. So we are advised to use these packages and we will be using this only. And let's start creating our Azure function using Visual Studio Code. So guys, I'm inside my Visual Studio Code. This is my Visual Studio Code. So over here you can see there's no option to create any Azure function. So you can explore it, but there will be no option over here. In the left navigation you can see there are few options: Explorer, Search. Then over here we have Source Control. This is debugging option, and at last we have extension. To create our Azure function using Visual Studio Code, we need to download the extension. To download the extension, we will be going to extensions. Over here we will search your extension in marketplace. I will type Azure function. So this is my extension, Azure function. You can see Azure function and Azure function extension for Visual Studio Code. So I will install this extension. I will click on install. So it is installing. So you can see once the installation is complete, over here we got another icon for Azure. So we will be using this to create the Azure function. Another important thing is this: in this extension also there is a little documentation, or you can say preview, how you can create our Azure function. So you can follow this also. Step by step guide is there. So let's start. We will start creating our first Azure function. So I will click on this icon Azure. So over here you can see I have various options: create new project, sign into Azure, create a free Azure account, all those. So these are three options. At the top I have again create new project. This is create function. First of all we will create a Azure function project, and then inside that we will be creating our Azure function. Third icon is to deploy my Azure function app directly to Azure. This is refresh, and the last one is the simple one, collapse all. So I will start with sign into Azure. I'll click on this. So guys, after 2 or 3 minutes, it opened the URL in the browser to sign in into my Azure. It is asking me to select the account. So I will enter my credential for the Azure. Next I will enter my password. So guys, once the login is successful, you will get this message: you are signed in and can close this page. So now our Visual Studio Code is logged in into Azure. So we can go back to our Visual Studio Code and see over here I have the free trial subscription. So I can see now my Visual Studio Code is able to log in into Azure. So now what I will do, I will create a new Azure function. To create a new Azure function, I'll click on this create new project. It will ask me to create a folder. I will create a folder with name DS Tech Mirror Azure function, and then I will select this folder. So inside this folder all my folder structure will get created. Next you can see it is asking me the language in which I want to create my project. So I will select TypeScript. We have other options also: JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Python, PowerShell. So I will select TypeScript. After that it is giving me all the triggers which I want to use. I will be using HTTP trigger. Other triggers are Azure Blob Storage trigger, Cosmo trigger. So you can see there are so many triggers available, but for today's demo I will be using HTTP trigger. So I will select HTTP trigger. I will leave it as it is, HTTP trigger 1, and then the authorization level. So I will select anonymous, then create in current window. So in my current window my project will get open. So guys, you can see we have successfully created our first Azure function. So this is my Azure function, DS Tech Mirror Azure function. This is my project hierarchy, project structure. So I will explain you. This is my trigger name, HTTP trigger 1. So inside that we have everything. So I will start explaining you this. So I will explain you all the important files. So first one is my trigger, HTTP trigger 1. If I expand it, I can see the first important file is index.ts. So this is the file where we will code our function, where we will write the entire code. The code which we are getting by default, I will explain you this also. So when we'll start coding, I will explain you the code. Another important file is function.json. So in this file we have all the bindings for a function. Our script file, that is index.js, is defined in this. Then after this we have another important file is local.setting.json. So in this file all the hard coding values, all the hard coded values we will create in this, and we can directly use in a Azure functions. So we will see how to use local.setting.json. Then package.json file is there. All my dev dependency, all the dependencies will be stored over here. And then my tsconfig file for my TypeScript. So this is the basic structure, folder structure of my Azure function. So we'll start with the index.ts. So guys, this is my index.ts file. I will explain you the code over here. So at the top, by default we are getting one import from Azure function service, Azure function context, and the HTTP request. Then after that this is the function which is defined. This is async function. Over here we have two parameter, context and the HTTP request. So HTTP REQ is of type HTTP request and context is of type context. So I will explain you both these parameter once I'll start the code. There are two important things over here which I'll show you the binding. So I'll go back to my function.json file. Over here you can see we have, in this file we will define the bindings of a function. So at present we have two bindings. One is the of invert type, that is in, and one is the outward type, that is out. What do you mean by this is, let's see. First of all, we will see this out type binding. This is of type HTTP. Name will be res. So I will be calling it response, and direction will be outward, which means is what my function will return. So when once my function execution is completed, it will return something. So I will be return it using res. So its type will be HTTP and direction will be outward. So if I go back, you can see over here, this is the demo code which I'm getting over here is, so in case of successful of if condition, so they are returning hello and some code which we will see, because we will be writing altogether a new code. So just understand, this is if I want to return anything from my function, I will be using context.res, and this is the binding which I have defined, which by default we get it in my function.json file. It is of type HTTP and direction is out. Another binding is my type of HTTP trigger and direction is in. See, my Azure function will get triggered by anything. So in our case, it is of type HTTP trigger. So in my case, my SPFx web part will trigger this Azure function. So it is of type in. So and name we are giving REQ. So let's say request, and the method it will support is get and post. So let's go to a function, and over here you can see this is the REQ we are using to get any property from the HTTP request which is triggering this function REQ.body, because in my HTTP request will be having body, certain parameters will be there. So if I want to access them, I will be using REQ. So anything I want to access through my incoming request, I will be using REQ, and anything I want to send back, I will be using res. So this is the two important parameters, REQ and res. Another thing is context.log. If I want to log anything in my Azure function, I will be using context.log. So it will directly get logged in my Azure function. So once my function will get deployed, I will show you over there in the Azure portal where I can see this log and messages. So also we will be installing PNP.js. Before that, we have to install this. We are getting this error because it cannot find module Azure function. So we will install Azure function module. So let's start with that. To start our code, first we will install our Azure function core tools. So for that, I will be using this command npm I is for install -g. Globally I will install it Azure function core tools at like second version, and I need it. So I'll press enter. So this will install the Azure function core tools. You can see we got this message downloading Azure function core tools. So it is in progress. So now our Azure function core tools installation is completed. So we will run the code. We will run this Azure function with the predefined code, and let's see. To run my code, press Ctrl F5. So when I try to run this function, I got the below error. Port 7071 is unavailable. Close the process using that port. So the default port is not available. So I have to run my Azure function on a different port. For that, what I will do, I will go to this file, local setting.json file, and in that file I will mention this code. Like I will mention my host and local HTTP port. I change the port. So I will save this file. We will delete this terminal, and on a new terminal, this time through terminal, I will try to run my code. So I can run my code either pressing Ctrl 5, or from the terminal I can type the command npm start. So now I will run my code. So you can see my code ran successfully. I will copy and paste it in the browser. So you can see my Azure function is running successfully and it is giving us a response. So we will go back to our code. This is my index.ts file. I will close my terminal. So you can see over here we have passed this response. Please pass a name on the query string or in the request body. So the default message we are getting. Till now we saw like we try to make understanding of the index.ts file. We saw what is this context object is, what is this request object, and the response file, how to run our code. Then we saw our function.js file where we have defined our bindings. Then in the local setting where we'll store our variables, where we saw we can, if we want to run our code on a different host, we can do that. So now what we will do, we will start our code, we will remove the existing code, and we will use our pnp.js to interact with the SharePoint. For doing that, we will be installing pnp.js. So now using this command, we will be installing our pnp.js. So the only important thing to note over here is we are appending this -common.js after every pnp package. This is to avoid any conflict with the AS6, as I already explained you. So now I'll press enter. So this will install the pnp.js in my Azure function. Then we will use this pnp.js to interact with the SharePoint, and we will create a new list item in our list. So you can see my pnp.js installed successfully. So now we'll start with pnp.js. So first of all, I will import sp from the pnp.js. So from @pnp. See over here you can see we have installed only these three files till now. So we are getting intelligence for all three, like Azure Functions we installed, Node.js, pnp Node.js we installed, and pnp common.js we installed. So I will use this pnp sp, and from this service I will import sp. So I will install pnp Node.js at pnp Node.js. So from this package I will import sp fetch client. So what it does over here, it is explained. Fetch client for use within Node.js require you register a client ID and client secret with app only permission. So with the help of sp fetch client, we will do our authorization part. We will register our client ID and client secret. So over here I will use from. So okay, so now what I will do, I will remove the existing code till here. So I will start with my own code. So I will write sp dot. First of all, what I will do, I will set up my context in pnp.js. For that I will use sp dot setup, and inside that I will use sp colon array, and inside that I will set up my fetch client. So it will be return fetch client factory, and inside this I will return new sp fetch client. And my sp fetch client, see over here you can see it requires my site URL, it requires client ID, and then it requires client secret. Other parameters are optional, so we will provide the three required parameters. So one is my site URL, second is my client ID, and third is my client secret. So all these three parameters are required to complete my setup. So after that I will be interacting with the SharePoint. So before that, site URL, I have it, so I have to generate my client ID and client secret. So for that I will go to my SharePoint. So guys, this is my SharePoint site, and this is my test list. I will be using this list for my hands-on purpose. So but before that I have to register my client. I have to generate my client ID and client secret. For that I will go to a page underscore layouts, so app new.aspx. So I will generate my client ID. So this is my client ID, this is my client secret, and title I will give DS Tech Mirror Azure Function Azure Function. App domain will be my Azure website, and I have put my redirect URL. So over here the important thing is client ID and the client secret. App domain and the redirect URL later on also I can change. So I will copy my client ID and I will paste it in my code. So this is my client ID, it requires, and this is my client secret. So these two are important. This is my client ID, this is my client secret, and my site URL. So this is my site URL. So I got all the three parameters. This is my site URL. So now I will create this. So now my app identifier got generated. So next step is to give permission to this app. So for granting the permission, I will redirect to app inv page. So in this page I will enter my client ID and do the lookup. So client ID is in my code. So I will put my client ID lookup. So it will populate all the details Now what we have to do is we have to grant permission. So for granting the permission, we will use this code, app permission request. So this is the XML. Over here you can see tag is app permission request. So and we will give allow app only policy true. So this app has elevated permission. It will run with app only policy. Then inside that we have app permission request, scope we defined, SharePoint / content site collection. So this app will be having full control over my entire site collection, PUC site collection, and rights I have given full control, and I have closed the tag. So I will click on create, and now I'm getting this error. So I'll go back. I'm getting the error because of this special character which got generated while copy paste. So now my app is SharePoint is asking whether I trust this app. So it is giving a message, let it have full control of this site collection, let it share its permission with other user, let it access basic information about the user of this site. So all these three permissions my app will be having, so I trust it. And now I have registered my app with SharePoint. So now I will go back to my Azure function. Over here you can see, so now these are hard coding values. So what I will do, I told you all the hard coded values I will be putting in my local setting.json file. So what I will do over here in the inside values, I will create client ID value. I have to put comma over here. Then I have client secret. So I will put all the hard coded values over here, and I will use in my function to use the best coding practices. And then I have site URL. Also I will be needing list title later on. So this is my list title. So what I will do, I will put all the hard coded values over here. This is my list. Sorry, this is my site URL. This is my client ID. So this is my client secret. And my list title is test. So now this way I will be maintaining my hard coded values over here. So now over here I can directly use those values. To use those values, what I will do, I will in Azure function we have this process class process.env.client ID. Then I have to use all these values on my own client ID. I have to make sure I don't make any type of mistakes. Process.env.client secret and process.env.site URL. So this way I will be handling my hard coded values. Let me just check if there is any spelling mistake, client ID or any other thing, client secret and site URL. So now I have set up my PNP.js. So now I will start creating the list item with the SharePoint. To start interacting with the SharePoint, I will use sp.web.list. So IntelliSense we are getting .get by title. So I've already stored my title. In this I will be using process.env.list title. So items add. So this way I will be adding items to my list. So what I will do, in that only I have title column. So I will be adding title column, and I will type Azure function. So after adding the items, I will handle my then part. What to do once my items are added to the list. So in then I will get the result. So result will be of type. So over here PNP.js give us the interface. We will use that, and it is item add result. So we will use that interface. For that we have to import it. So it is present in this PNP/sp package. Item add results. So let's try if we can go to the definition of this interface and check what is there in it. So I press F12, and over here you can see I got the item and the data to process the result, which I will be getting after adding an item to the result. So my result will be of type item add result. I will use the arrow functions. So in that now I have got the result. So now I will be using this result to get the outcome of it, result.c. So I just now show you in my interface. We will go back in the interface item add result. In this we are getting these two items, item of type interface item and of type item update result. So So data and the result. So the result, updated result we will get in data. So we will go back and now result dot data dot. So we will get the ID of the item which is added into the list, and I want to store it. So for storing it, what I will do, at the top I will create a let item ID, it's of type number, and over here I will use it item ID equal to result.data.id. So in return it is giving us the ID. So now what I will do, the entire thing I will store it in result, the entire function, it is of type any. So now I want to return this response to the browser or whatever the HTTP request trigger my Azure function will receive. So in the beginning I told you to send the response in the function.json file. I have defined my trigger, that is res. I will be using it. So what I will do, I will use this context.c. I told you I will explain you this context object. So in the context object, there are two parameter in my Azure function. One is the context and one is the HTTP request. So request, I told you we will be using to get any data out of the incoming request. And now this context object, it has binding data, binding function. It has very limited functions. So till now we know we have used req, request, response. These two are there. This is to enter logging. So in this demo we will be interacting with these three properties or methods only. So now context.response. So response is another property which we have defined in our binding. It is of type out. So context.response is equal to, I will define body. In this I will be defining my message, and what message I will give, item created successfully, and I will be, let's say, with ID, item created successfully with ID, and over here I will mention my item ID. So now what I will do, when I will press Ctrl F5, my Azure function will run and it will create an item in my SharePoint list, test list, and in the browser it will show me this message, item created successfully, because of this context.response. But still now we have one issue in my code. What is there? See, this is an asynchronous function. So what will happen, by the time item will get added into my list, my context.response will be thrown into the browser or will be thrown to the calling function, and this item ID will be undefined. So I have to wait for this function to get completed before sending any response. And for that, what I will be using, I will use await keyword. So now this will be a synchronous call. Till the time this call get completed, my response will not be triggered. So now I think my Azure function code is ready. I will explain you once again. So this is a function which we are getting by default, name Azure function. Two parameters are there, context and HTTP request. Inside that we created item ID just to get the item ID. Over here to set the context right, so sp.setup. Inside that I have to register this Azure function with the client ID and client secret. So for that I will use fetch client factory. So return new sp fetch client, and over there I provide the three parameters. To avoid hard coding, I will be using the local setting.json file. So I think this is there, and this is my pnp.js code, sp.web.list.getByTitle.items.add. This is my title I'm adding, and after that I'm getting the item ID from the outcome. So item ID is of type item added result, and I imported it at the top. So let's save it and I will run it. So to run it, I will run it from the terminal and I will use npm start. So guys, our execution is completed. Now in the terminal we can see this URL is there. So now I will copy this URL and I will try to open it in the browser to trigger my Azure function, because I told you that Azure functions are event triggered. So let's go to the browser. This is my browser. But I'm getting an error. You can see over here it is giving me HTTP error 500. So Azure function is not working. So let's go back to the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so over here it is giving me an error. So let's see what is the error. System.failure, only absolute URLs are supported. So it is giving me error related to my URL. So where I am passing my URL, I am passing the URL over here in the HP fetch client factory, and in the local setting.json file are my hard coding. So over here URL is also fine. Okay, so I can see what is my error. I think I have mismatched the parameters to be passed in the SPFetch client. So let me cross check it again. What are the parameters? SPFetch client. Okay, so over here you can see first parameter should be site URL, second should be client ID, and third should be client secret. So I have mismatched it. So okay, I will correct it because of which my Azure function is not working. So first should be my site URL. It should not be the last one. So first is site URL, second is my client ID, third is my client secret. Okay, now I think it's correct. So I will terminate this process and I will run again. So you can run your Azure function using Control F5 or through terminal writing npm start command. So now we will see it should work now. So again I'm getting this URL, I will copy it. So I will paste this URL, I'll click again, or I can refresh the same tab again. Okay, so my Azure function is working because I'm getting this message item created successfully with ID 64. So now my Azure function is working. The URL, the error was the parameter mismatch. So you can see over here we passed this response. So I told you that context.response is the output which we want to give from our Azure function to the calling body. So this time we are calling it from the browser, so we can see this message in the browser directly. So this is the message and this is the item ID for the item which is created in my SharePoint list. So I will go to the list. So this is my list. Okay, over here you can see my item got created. This is my item Azure function app created by DS Tech Mirror Azure function. This is the app which we created by SharePoint app. Another important thing to be noticed, this does not run with the current user credential. This is running with the app credential, and my app is having full control over the site collection. So it is run with elevated privileges, modified by SharePoint app created a minute ago. So my Azure function is up and running. So guys, till now we saw how to create Azure function using Visual Studio Code using extension. We downloaded the extension, then we created this Azure function. I explained you the project structure, then the out of the box code, the default code which we were getting. Then we write this code how to create an item in the SharePoint list. We saw how to install the Azure functions, Azure function core tool. We saw how to install PNP.js and how to interact with the SharePoint. Now let me close this terminal. Now we will see how to deploy this to the Azure. Now this Azure function is running locally. I want to deploy this to the Azure. For deployment to the Azure, what I will do, I will go to this extension Azure, from where I have created this Azure function. Now from the top, the third icon is for the deployment. It's deploy to function app. So I will click on it, deploy to function app. So it will ask me some questions. Create a new function app in Azure. It is asking whether you want to deploy to some existing app or you want to create a new function app in Azure. So I will select create a new function app in Azure. It is asking me for the name. So I will say DS Tech Mirror Azure function. I will give it the name. So I will press enter, then select a runtime. So Node.js. So my Node.js version is 10.16. So I will select Node.js 10. Then it will ask me to select these are the servers which Microsoft servers. So I just want to select the location. So I will select Central US. So now over here at the bottom you can see that my deployment is in progress. It is giving me some messages, creating storage account for my Azure function in the Azure. So once the deployment is completed, it will show me over here so that deployment is completed. Now creating new application insights. We can see all this thing inside our Azure function in Azure. I will show you in some time. Now it is creating the new function app for our Azure. Now it is creating my function app. Now it is running pre-deployed task npm prune. So everything is happening automatically. I simply click the deploy button in my Visual Studio Code. Deploying to DS Tech Mirror Azure function. So guys, my deployment is completed. It is saying deployment to DS Tech Mirror Azure function completed. So over here it is giving me three options. Okay, they were stream logs and the upload settings. So we will see automatically in the view output. So output is this one. So nothing is there in my output window. So my deployment is completed. So I will go to my Azure and I will see my Azure function over there. So this is my Azure. I will refresh it. To log in into Azure, what you can do, you can go to your browser and type portal.azure.com. So then you can enter your credentials or select the account, and then you will be taken to your Azure portal. So this is my Azure portal. Over here I will try to find my app. Now to select my Azure function or to go to my Azure function, what I will do, I will go to this left navigation. From here, under this, I can see this function app. Under favorites, I can see this function app. So I will select function app. So over here, I can find my Azure function. This is DS Tech Mirror Azure function. So this is the function app, and inside this, I can see my Azure function. So over here, you can see it is running. Location central USB selected. Pricing is dynamic. Subscription, this is free trial version. So I will select this DS Tech Mirror Azure function. So guys, you can see this over here. I'm getting my Azure function. So if you remember, we select the trigger as HTTP trigger 1. So this is my Azure function. So if I click on it, so this is the code. So this is the code which we uploaded in the Azure. You can see index.js file. So this is appearing a bit different because this is in the JS file, because our compiler transpile the TypeScript, because we write our code in TypeScript, it transpiled it into JS, which my browser will understand. So you can see my code is there. Over here, items, everything which we added. This is the context.response which you send from the browser. Also we can run our code. If I try to run it from here, so you can see it is giving us error, only absolute URLs are supported. So the reason is because the URL which we are saving is in the local setting.json file. So I'll show you. If you remember, this is the file in which we are saving all our hard-coded values. Hard-coded values are present in this file, but this file is, you can see the name is local setting.json file. This file is not yet uploaded to the Azure. We have to upload it because this is the local file. So guys, to overcome this URL, we have to upload our local settings to this Azure. So I will show you. Like if we go to my, this is my Azure function app and this is my Azure function. So if we go to the app, and these are our local settings. I'll go to my solution explorer. I will go to my solution explorer. This is local setting.json file. So all these values are not yet uploaded to the Azure. That's because of which we are getting the error. So I am in my DS Tech Mirror Azure function app. From this breadcrumb you can see. Then I'll go to the configuration. So you can see these are the configuration which my function in the Azure will use. From here it will use. So we have to upload our local settings over here. So to do that, I will go to the Visual Studio Code. So this is my Visual Studio Code to upload the settings. If you remember, once the deployment is completed, it was also giving us an option to upload the settings, but at that time we skipped. So after that, after the deployment also we can do that. So for that I will go to the Azure extension. So this was my function. So what I will do, this is my subscription free trial. I will expand it. Over here I can see my app, DS Tech Mirror Azure function app. So I will expand it. This is my application settings. I will right click it, and over here you can see I have the option upload local settings. I will select it. So now my upload local settings is in progress. It will upload all the local setting which is present in my local setting.json file. See, edit the following setting: client ID, client secret, site URL, and list titles. So I think it has already uploaded. So let's go back to the Azure portal and I will refresh it. So guys, you can see now I have my list title, site URL. So by default they are hidden. I can view them. So now they are uploaded. Now I will go back and try to run my function directly from the Azure. So what I will do, I will go to this app. Inside the app I can see my function HTTP trigger under function. So in one Azure app we can upload or we can deploy multiple Azure functions also. So right now only one function is there, HTTP trigger 1. So I will click on it. So now I will click on run. So over here you can see the message, item created successfully with ID 65. So I will go back to my list and see. So see, you can see the item got created. So guys, we can execute our function directly from the Azure also. So this is primarily if you are in the beginning I told you that from the Azure portal also we can create an Azure function. So if we are using that option, so this is where you can test your function. Now guys, let's explore this platform features. So in this, the important feature which we want to is CORS, codes. So I want to enable it because I will be invoking this Azure function from my SharePoint framework. So they both are in different domain. So I will be enabling it, cross origin resource sharing. So enable access control allow credential. Over here I have to mention the origin, so I will mention it later on. Once I'm ready with my SharePoint framework web part, I will mention the URL over here. For now, what I will do, I will include my SharePoint site over here. Otherwise, it will not allow us. So this is an important step. So I have to include my tenant URL. So now it will allow my tenant URL. So I have enabled the course also, cross origin resource sharing. So now what I have to include only my SharePoint framework, because my SharePoint framework will run locally on localhost. So I will add that localhost over here later on. So there are many options, but I will tell you the options which are useful for us for today's demo. So one of them is cross origin resource sharing course. So you can go to once again I will show you. You can go to your Azure Function app, and inside platform feature over here at the top you can see there are two tabs. Overview. Over here you can see the detail about your Azure Function app. It is running, the subscription ID, resource group, all those things. Then over here we have configurations, where we have uploaded our configuration. We can see the configuration, function app settings. Inside function app setting, I think for today's demo it is not useful for us. And application insight I will show you. Then if we go to platform feature, in platform feature under API we have to enable course, CORS. So guys, I'm back in my Azure Function app. I will go to my Azure Function HTTP trigger 1, and under it I will move to monitor. So from here we can monitor our Azure functions. So you can see these are the instances which ran till now. So out of this, first 3 got failed. So we got the error 500. So because it was because of that absolute URL issue. So the last one which we deployed from here, so it was success. So I will select it. Over here you can see all I showed you over here in my code context.log. So all the logging you can see over here. So this was our log. HTTP trigger function processed the request. So to see those logs, so what you have to do, you have to come under this your function monitor, and you have to select your instance, and then you can see. So guys, from the Azure portal I have pretty much covered everything which is useful for you. In the next part we will see how to invoke this function from inside SPFx web part. So let's see. So guys, I'm inside my SPFx web part. So this is my SPFx Azure function, and this is my web part name, Azure function web part. So I've created this web part using React. So I will be, with the help of React, so I will be calling my Azure function inside this web part. So I will just give you a brief about this web part. This is my source file, and inside my source file I have this web part file, Azure function webpart.ts file. The only important thing in this file is, in this file I'm having my web part context. So my web part context is not present outside the web part file. So you can see this is my context. So you can see this dot context. So over here you can see this is my web part context. So this is present just inside my web part. So this is one important concept over here. Apart from that, nothing we are going to do in this file. So next important file is under component file, under component folder. So this is my Azure function.tsx file. So all the coding we will be doing in this file only. And this is my properties file. This is Azure function props.ts. So in React we have properties and state. So in simple words you can understand, this is my properties file. All the values which I want to capture and use in the code, I will be using properties. Let's say description, or you can say you can consider properties as a variable to store values, and all the state is all the values which I will be getting from my operations, and I want to use it, and I want to display in my web page. For that I will be using state. This is my tsx file. So I will go to my tsx file, and this is the DOM which is there. So if I run my web part as it is, so to run the web part in local, I will be using gulp serve command. I can do that from the terminal. To go to the terminal, press Ctrl tilt. So I will type gulp serve. So now my gulp serve is running. So it will run my web part on the local workbench. So I will open the web part. Azure function is the name of my web part. So you can see my web part is running. Over here I will just show you the DOM of my web part, which we have to modify just a bit. See, you can see over here This is the title, description. Azure function is the title of the web part. Description is blank, and this is my learn more. Over here it is coming. So what I will do, I will start modifying it. So what I will do, I will add one button over here, and on the click of a button we will be calling our Azure function. So let's start. So I will remove this anchor tag. I don't want this anchor tag. I will remove the description also, and the subtitle, these two I will remove. So what I will do, I will create a button over here. I will use simple button, HTML button, and I will name the text of my button as Azure function, or I'll say invoke Azure function. Invoke Azure function. So this is my button, and on my button click I will call a function. So here I will mention my function. So my function name will be, let's say I will name my function as get Azure function. So I will create my function over here at the top, public get Azure function. It will return void, return type will be void, and this is my function. Now I will call this function on my button click. So it will be, so I will start developing my function now, get Azure function. I will be using REST API to call the Azure function present deployed in the Azure. So for that I will be using HTTP client. So for that I needed context. So in the beginning I told you that my web part context is present in my web part file. So I have to pass it from there. For that I will be using React properties. So in the properties I will declare context. It is of type web part context, and we will import it. So we imported it from Microsoft SP web part based service. So now I have declared my context properties. So I will pass it from my web part file. This is my web part file, and in this over here you can see inside the render method I have to pass it from here Azure function. So description is one of the property which was by default it is present. So it is my context, it is present in my React property file, and value will be this dot context. So this is the context we have. If I hover over it, I would like to show you. Okay, I'll show you over here. See the description is saying this object contains the contextual services available to a web part. Example, a contextual instance to the HTTP client. So we will be needing HTTP client. So just a small description for you guys. And now I am present in my tsx file. So now I will start using my context. So to use the context I will use this dot props dot context dot. Now my HTTP client dot, I will be using post, because so in this post I can see what it is. The parameter I have to pass is the URL, HTTP configuration, and the options which is of type HTTP client option. This is an interface. So this will be my URL, and configuration will be HTTP client dot. So first of all I have to import it from the Microsoft HTTP service from at Microsoft/sp -http. So from this I will import HTTP client response, and HTTP client options. So these three things I needed. So now what I will do, HTTP client dot configuration dot v1 I will use, and in this I have to pass my interface HTTP client options. So now I will create my options. So this is pretty simple. This dot props dot context with HTTP client dot post, I will be posting a request. Now I need this Azure function URL. To get the Azure function URL, what I will do, I will go to my Azure portal. In my Azure portal, so this is my Azure portal, and in this you can see in my function HTTP trigger 1 I have this get function URL. So this is my function URL. I will copy it as it is copied. I will go back to my SPFx web part, and I will copy the URL over here. This is my URL. So my two parameters are completed. The only one is left is HTTP client options. So for that I will go at the top. I will create the options over here. I will create constant options. It will be of type HTTP client options. It will be of type this interface equal to, and in this I will be passing two parameters, headers, and next will be my body. So these two things I need. In the body I will be passing my SharePoint site URL. This is my URL. This is my site URL. And now my headers are left, so I will create the headers. So let's say constant request headers of type headers equal to new headers. Now request headers. Why I'm getting an error? I should see. Okay, this I think this is because of my constant. Okay, so request headers dot append. What I will append my headers, one is the content type, so you can see name and value. This is key value pair type, content type, and its value will be application/json. Next will be request header dot append. Next will be accept header, and value will be same, application/json. So now my headers are also completed. I will pass them inside this. Headers will be of type request headers. So my HTTP client options, my options are also ready now. What I did, I'm passing my headers and body. So now over here I will pass this options. So it needs of type HTTP client option. So it's simple. So my HTTP client.post require my URL. I got it from the Azure configuration. You can simply use HTTP client.configuration.v1, and then the options, it requires HTTP client option, so I provided. So this will invoke my function. So now what I'll do, once my function is invoked, my Azure function will return something, so that I will catch it in then. So whatever the response I will get, it will be of type HTTP client response. I'll use the arrow function to operate on this. So now what I will do, response.text, because my Azure function is not returning me in JSON format. Response.text I will get, then I will do then, let's say result, it is of type any. Again I will use arrow function to operate on this, and inside this I will set my state. So why I will set my state, because result I will be passing it over here. After the button I will pass it. I will create a div, and inside this div I will pass my result. So the response which I will get from the Azure function, I will show it over here in my web part. So over here I got the result from here. So now I told you state we use if we want to show that result inside the DOM, or if we want to operate it on. For state I will create an interface, export interface. So I will name it as Azure function state. So in this I will create one, say let's say a message. It will be of type any. So now my message is ready, and now I have to pass it in my render function also, in my component. Yeah, in my component also I have to pass it. So Azure function state, I passed it over here also. Now what I have to do, I will come over here inside the result. So I will do this dot set state. My state is message I will set it to result. So whatever the result I will get it from here, and in my div I will show the result. To show the result I will use curly braces. It will be this dot state dot message, and now I have to call by constructor just to initialize my state. Constructor, now it is giving me an error because I have to call my constructor of the parent class using super and with the properties, and my properties props colon Azure function props. So from over here I will pass the super parameter, and now I will initialize my state. So to initialize this state I will use this dot state equal to, okay, it's not result, it's message. In my state it is message, so message will be blank. And now I will do the binding for my get Azure function. So in React we have to do the binding for the function with this keyword, this dot get Azure function equal to this dot get Azure function dot bind with this. So I think I'm ready with my SPFx web part. I will explain you once again what we did so far. So this is my DOM inside the render method in my component file, which is tsx file. Inside that what I did, I simply created a button. On button click I'm calling a function, and after this I have created a div. In this I am showing the result or the response which I am getting from my Azure function. For response, for catching the response, I am using React states. To use state we have to create one interface. So I've created the interface over here, export, and I've exported the interface Azure, and I've declared it a variable or state of type any message. Then I have to initialize my state in my constructor. So I did that in the constructor. When I create the constructor, I have to call the, because it extends react.component, so I have to call the constructor of the parent class. So I did that with super keyword. Then I set my state, this dot state is equal to blank, and I have to do the binding of my function which I am calling on the button click. So this dot get Azure function is equal to dot bind this. So all these things I did. Then this is my function, public get Azure function. In this I am using REST API. This dot props dot context dot HTTP client. To use this I have to import it from Microsoft SP HTTP. So I imported it. It requires 3 parameters: URL, configuration, and the options. So URL I get from the Azure. This is my function. And for options I created function using this headers. Headers is content type and accept. And then for in the options I need another thing I need is body. So I pass my site collection URL. And after that I got the response. I converted the response in the text, and then I set it to my state. So I am ready with my Azure function. Now what I will do, I will go to the terminal and I will run it. So now my webpart deployment is completed. My gulps are running is completed, and it is giving me a message to reload. So I will go back to my browser and I will reload it. Now I will add my webpart. My webpart name is Azure function, and you can see I am getting my button invoke Azure function. I will click on it. So guys, when I'm clicking this button, nothing is happening. I think there is some error. So I'll click F12, and in the console what I'll do, I'll clear all the logs. I'll click again. So I'm getting this codes error because I'm in a different domain. So if you remember, I told you that we have to add this localhost in our domain as well. So I will copy this. I will go to my Azure portal. I will go to my Azure function app. In the platform feature under API, we have cross origin resource sharing to be enabled. I will click on it and I will add this URL. So I think after that it should work. So now it is enabled. I will go back and I will click on my button again. So guys, you can see I'm getting this message, item created successfully with ID 69. Once I click this button, so I'll go to my list and see. I will refresh the list and I can see the item in my list. So it is created by my Azure function which I called from SPFx webpart. So what I'll do, I'll delete all the items first and I will do it again. So this is my webpart. I will click on invoke Azure function. So it is taking some time to create the item. And once I receive the message, so I got the message that item created successfully with ID 70. I'll go back. I will refresh it. So guys, my SPFx webpart is working fine. It is able to call my Azure function. It is working. The only important thing is don't forget to enable the calls for your local host. That you can do. Go back to your Azure function app and under platform feature under API you can edit and save it. So guys, we have completed our demo. So this is the summary. So I assumed like you already have Node.js in your machine. So that's why I have not shown you how to install Node.js, but you can install it. So I have 10.16 version in my machine. Then install Visual Studio Code. After installing the Visual Studio Code, we saw like we have to install the Azure extension in VS Code. After the extension, we created the project using the extension. Then we installed inside the Azure function, we installed the Azure function code tools and PNP.js. After that, we developed our Azure function using PNP.js and we created a new item in SharePoint list. In the next step, we deploy our Azure function to the Azure. Then we saw few of the options in the Azure. The important one is to enable codes because we have to call a function from the SPFx webpart. So this is the summary which we have learned today. So guys, thanks for watching the video. Please like and share this video and do not forget to press the subscribe button below to get the notification about my new video. Till then, much love, keep learning. Thank you.